Good morning. I'm Mike, and today I'm going to review Chapter 8 of the book Crucial Influence: Leadership Skills to Create Lasting Behavior Change by Grenny, Patterson, Maxfield, McMillan, and Switzler. In Chapter 8, entitled Change the Environment, we explore the sixth source of influence for behavior change in organizations, and this is structural ability. This has to do with modifying the environment and making certain behaviors easier and unwanted behaviors a little more difficult. This can be done in a few ways. The authors mention that changing the environment, changing things, is often easier than trying to change people. There are certain things about the environment, such as the way things are situated, and even the proximity of individuals, which can have a major impact. So things matter. For example, in a neighborhood where there's a lot of broken windows and just not well-kept neighborhood, it's a case of chicken or the egg. There's kind of a mentality of this is okay, this is more of a crime-ridden area. But what if we were to uplift that area and clean it up, not have the broken windows? Would it be as acceptable for crimes to be committed in those areas or for certain activities? These visual cues, such as broken windows versus a clean environment, they actually affect behavior. And that's a key point, that these cues can shape attitudes and behaviors in ways which are significant. The authors mention that we overlook the power of things in the environment. There are certain elements that might not be noticeable at first, but when we take note of the influence that these things have, we can find ways to change them around just a bit in order to influence behavior. Thinking about how we can change things to influence behavior. There are a few points that the authors mention, and these are to add a cue, change the data stream, promote propinquity, make it easy, and change a process. When talking about adding a cue, making the invisible visible. The authors did talk about an incident where a lot of space was not being utilized in storage for transportation. A transportation company would fill certain containers to a certain level, or maybe randomly with different objects in different containers, but not make full use of the space until they marked or put a line inside the containers or on the containers stating that fill to this line. Then the space was properly utilized, there was less waste, and people just automatically knew, fill to this line instead of just randomly putting a couple objects in this one, packing this one, putting a few in this one. That fill line was a cue, and that made the process more efficient and changed that behavior without even saying anything. For changing a data stream, I'm not sure if I totally understood this part, but from what I understand, it's changing the information that people receive in the organization. Getting information about what's good, what's bad behavior, what's the result of these behaviors. And people change their priorities based on this information. Instead of just production numbers, we might give more information about stakeholders and customer feedback. What's the meaning behind the numbers? Looking at a change in the information or data stream, followers in the organization can see meaning behind why we do things a certain way and can drive meaningful, intentful change for those behaviors or through those behaviors. As leaders, we focus on the information that we share and think about what information am I sharing? How is that going to impact the way that people perform? Probably the favorite part of this section is to promote propinquity. That's Propinquity. That has to do with the proximity of things, proximity of people, of objects. The authors give an example of changing behaviors at home. For example, if you don't want to eat as much junk food, maybe place it in a place that's not as accessible. So maybe you have it every now and then, instead of just right here at the desk where you can just munch on it whenever you feel like it. So that propinquity, that spatial, that influence there is going to affect the behavior significantly. The authors mentioned about some research, I believe, where placing junk food within arm's reach versus, on the shelf somewhere or across the room impacts how much a person might eat it, consume it during a day. So it actually affects behavior just placing that object within the vicinity. One of the most interesting ways that propinquity can be utilized is thinking about how people are placed. How close are direct reports to the chief executives? How close are team members to one another? A distance of a few feet or within the same space to feel like a team versus 90 feet away, or even being in a different department, can be the difference between we're working together as a team or starting to form silos within the organization, where it's us and them, and they are the outsiders. So we think about how can we develop more closeness or propinquity amongst team members or even departments. Some ways might be to have that physical proximity or some way of interacting more. The authors mentioned that this can even be done in the virtual environment, where there's time during virtual meetings to actually develop some personal relationship amongst members. Members might talk about work-related hopes, fears, successes, and have that intentional time to develop relationships. So that it's not just us in this department and them, but we're developing as a team, we're working together, we're people. We recognize that common humanity, if you will. A key point that the authors mention is that we can develop that sense of bad people being out there whom we rarely interact with and we don't trust and get along with as much. But being aware of the propinquity, it'll increase the chance that relationships will develop. Another point is to make it easy. So back to the propinquity, having things within proximity, but also structurally, ensuring that processes are in place which allow for new behaviors to take place. Instead of having a lot of red tape to go through, knowing that we want to enact this behavior change, we have to make the processes more easier to adopt these behaviors. I'd encourage you to read this chapter and see for yourself some of the examples and how they might translate into what you can apply in your organization. In summary, the key point here is that things are far easier to change than people. And we can do things like add a cue to influence behavior, even non-verbally. Change the information that people receive. Promote spatial propinquity, having people work more closely with one another. Making it easier through processes. These are all ways that we can influence change through structural change.